and having deformities with organs and things after they're born. I mean, this is mega massive, ladies and gentlemen. That's some of the things I wanted to throw out there because this is so diabolical. I know he says it gets into all that, but I want to get your take on that. So continue walking us through this story that you cover in your amazing investigative book, sir. Please continue.
Let's take the geopolitics a step further in time and go to the year 1992, sometime after this whole GMO project was started by the Rockefeller Foundation. And we have a meeting, a closed-door White House meeting, unpublicized, between George Herbert Walker Bush, the president at the time, and the president of Monsanto in St. Louis, the leading patenter of genetically modified seeds and also the chemical herbicides that are uniquely suited to those GMO seeds, like Roundup Ready soybean seeds and Roundup herbicide by Monsanto. You have to have both. So anyway, Monsanto sat down with Papa Bush in 1992 and said, look, this can be a huge, this was the public version of what they said. You can imagine what they said in private. This can be a huge boon, a new growth area for the U.S. economy, biotechnology, genetically modified seeds, and so forth. But in order for the private sector to really do its stuff, we need to be free to be creative, free from government meddling. So Father Bush signed an executive order that is called the Substantial Equivalence Order. Now, listeners should write that down and study that word and look it up under Google because it's worth looking. Substantial equivalent means, according to Bush, according to this executive department order in 1992, that GMO corn or GMO soybean is to henceforth be treated as substantially equivalent to a normal ear of corn or a normal sprout of soybeans.
So they wave a magic wand, no more testing, no more nothing, put whatever you want on their plates, add other animal, insect, plant, DNA
exactly.
to it, just I'm the judge, jury, I'm now the EPA and the FDA, I wave a wand.
The EPA and the FDA then was staffed by Monsanto people or people from DuPont and Dow in a revolving door system, and they would write the rules for the EPA. The EPA would accept the tests of Monsanto as Bible truth and never second guess them. I mean, the criminal conflict of interest here is just staggering, and most Americans think, well, we have a Food and Drug Administration that is mandated to protect the food and health of the American people. Well, guess again, ladies and gentlemen, they aren't doing that in Washington since at least 1992.
Briefly, I just want to add this, and I'm going to try to let you go. Just there's so much. I want to back up. Remember the different university studies they did in the U.S. and Europe where they found that if an authority figure said kill one in a test, they thought in the university they were really killing people. 90+% of the time they would commit the murder just because an authority figure told them it was okay to do in a university study. Remember the electroshocks? It's the same thing. The president says no more restrictions, no more testing. They would then follow the orders, even though whistleblowers came out and said this is deadly, this is going to kill people. They just said nope. The president says it's good.
Well, one of the most famous cases of whistleblowers, a dear friend of mine, Dr. Arpad Pustai, who was living in Scotland, and he was fired from Rowett Research Institute at the time, 1997. He was the world's leading GMO researcher and thought it was a positive boon for mankind, a solution to world hunger. And he did exactly the kind of research you're talking about with laboratory rats and potatoes. And this man is no amateur. He's now 77 years old and highly informed and careful scientist. And he found that the brains, the inner organs of the rats fed on GMO potatoes diet for more than 3 months were dramatically shrunken. And he told his boss and said, we have to sound the alarm on this. They went on Channel 4, a prominent British television channel. It was picked up all around the world for 72 hours. And then suddenly it was dead in the water. You never heard another word about
And then they fired him. Thank God for him blowing the whistle. I interviewed him several times. I've dropped out of touch with him. I need to get his number again. We had a computer fail. I need to get him back on, but go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. He's more than willing to talk about these dangers. But as he puts it, basically the British government was willing to make the population human guinea pigs in something that should be at the very, very minimum 20 or more years of long-term, totally controlled animal studies before the genie is released and set forth on the human.
And by the way, you just glazed over that. It did a lot more to the rats. It caused the bizarre afterbirth deformity. It caused them to have intestinal tumors, all sorts of medical problems.
These were some other experiments, so far as I know, but... yeah,
well, on my show, he was covering the other experiments that other...
Okay, okay, but that... yeah. In other words, it's highly unstable, as Dr. Pustai repeatedly points out. This is not some stable alteration. It's not like hybrid corn where you breed two strains of corn for weather resistance. This is introducing foreign genetic material. This is unnatural alteration of the DNA.
But that's what Rush Limbaugh does. And you know, he goes on and he says, when you breed two dogs, that's genetic engineering. When you cross the corn like George Washington Carver, but that's natural breeding. That's how things naturally mixed in the wild.
Species.
It's the same species. It's not with a gene gun firing reptile genetics into a salmon gene and then putting that in corn.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let me give another example, which is, I think, one of the emblematic examples. In 2001, a small San Diego biotech company called Episeat, maybe you've heard of it. Few people have. Episeat, the president of Episeat, gave a press conference. He was just as pleased as punch to announce this to the world. And he said, back behind me, we have a greenhouse full of spermicidal corn. That is corn genetically modified so that men, this is not animals, men who eat this corn will become sterile. And it's a spermicide. It kills sperm. And he said this is a solution to the world population problem.
Yeah,
now, if you live in Mexico, you know how, or if you even travel through Mexico and Central America, so you know that corn is a staple of the peasant diet
and that's going to jump into other corn, open air planted, just like Protegene with the AIDS virus jackets in the corn, and then that happened 8 years ago and was quietly covered up. Unbelievable.
Yep. Well, as one scientist from Stanford University put it, you would think that no one in their right mind would do something like this, but as he put it, and he worked on the Jason project with the Pentagon as a biologist and so forth, so he knew a little bit the inside story. He said, not everybody is in their right mind. And that, I think, sums it up. There are people in a power elite, for them, power is a self-feeding aphrodisiac of some perverse sort that I don't fully understand, but they are different from ordinary human beings, and they just... human life is for them simply an externality. As long as they and their friends are provided for as they see fit, then the rest of the human species would.
Well, I agree, but it's worse than that. A lot of top futurists, top globalists have written, and history shows it with Nero and you know the craziness. Vlad the Impaler, they go crazy and they become nihilistic and self-destructive. And so you hear them writing about it. Even the head people at Hadron are saying, well, there's a small chance it'll destroy the Earth, but we don't care. And they put the death god Shiva above it. Or you talk to these geneticists and they go, so what? So if we make something that takes over the planet, that's regular evolution because we evolved and did it. And so what if it kills us all? We need to be killed. I mean, these are maniacs, and they get off on like driving a car at 100 miles an hour around jagged turns. A lot of Hollywood folks do stuff like that and get killed. You know, like James Dean. It is just a complete mania.
Yep. And now, go back a little bit to the 1950s, because the Rockefeller Foundation, again, was behind this project, called the Agribusiness Project of the Harvard Business School. John W. Davis, who was a former Assistant Agriculture Secretary under Eisenhower, Ray Goldberg, who still kicking at age 91 and sits on the board of several GMO companies, Goldberg and Davis created something called agribusiness. They invented the term. And what their goal was to vertically integrate the entire food production, distribution, processing and distribution into a mega industry, globalized, first in the United States and then globalized in the last 15, 20 years. And in doing so, and then adding as the icing on the cake, patented seeds, GMO seeds, and in a few years there'll be seeds secretly filled with Terminator, ostensibly to protect patent rights of Monsanto et al. They will have control, and they will be able, in a military sense, to exercise strategic denial. If a country like Iraq or Iran or Zimbabwe or any other priority hate object of a particularly Washington government, God forbid that we would ever have a government which doesn't exercise reason and justice in Washington, but in case that were to happen, and they would simply say, okay, Monsanto, cut off the seed supply of Zimbabwe, cut off the seed supply of China, cut off the seed supply of Azerbaijan.